The signal from the sea, the ocean, was too quiet that morning. Mark stood at the edge of the trees, boots half buried in sand, staring at the waves that gently touched the rocky shore. His small scout ship, Pathfinder, rested behind him, half hidden, in the jungle undergrowth. The island wasn't on any map. It wasn't even supposed to be here. His mission was simple: scan for habitable terrain, collect samples, and report back. But then the signal came, soft, faint, almost broken. He found it by accident, a pulsing blip on his handheld scanner. Old tech, buried deep in static. No ship nearby. No satellite overhead, just a signal. Coming from this lonely island, Mark adjusted his gear and stepped onto the beach. The air was warm, the sky pale green. Strange birds circled overhead, their calls echoing through the tall trees. The place was beautiful but too still, too untouched. Like something had once happened here, and everything just stopped. He followed the signal, moving toward the northern cliffs. The path was overgrown with vines. Old stone steps were hidden beneath moss and cracked leaves. This wasn't just wild terrain. It was once built. Someone had lived here. And then he saw it. A structure. Small. Dome-shaped. Almost swallowed by nature. Its walls were dull silver, scratched by time and weather. Plants grew through broken panels. A faint blue light blinked near the doorway, the source of the signal. Mark stepped closer, touched the control panel. Dead. But the light kept blinking. He knelt and brushed away dust. Symbols, alien, elegant, glowed faintly on the side. He didn't recognize the language, but it was clear. This wasn't human-made. "Anyone inside?" he called. No answer. He pulled out his toolkit and started working. The door hissed open. Inside, the air was dry, stale. Old furniture, broken machines, and a cracked console lined the small chamber. A cot sat in the corner. Empty. But there were signs of life. Recent life. A half-burnt cloth near a small fire pit. A cup with water still inside. Someone had been here. Maybe still was. Mark stepped outside, eyes scanning the area. Then he saw it near the edge of the cliff, just past a fallen tree. A shape. He ran. There, half covered in leaves and dirt, lay a figure. Unmoving. Delicate. An alien woman. Her skin was a soft silver blue, glowing faintly under the morning light. Her body was thin, her arms scratched. Long tangled hair covered half her face. She wore torn fabric wrapped around her like a robe. The same alien symbols marked her arms, faded and cracked. Mark knelt beside her. "Hey," he said softly. "Can you hear me?" No response. He checked her pulse, slow but steady. He pulled out his canteen, poured a little water onto her lips. Her throat moved. She swallowed weakly, then her eyes opened. Golden, wide, full of fear. She tried to speak, but no sound came. "It's okay," Mark said gently. "You're safe. I won't hurt you." She blinked, tried to sit up, but her body failed her. "Don't move," he said. "You're hurt." He lifted her carefully. She was light, like someone who hadn't eaten in days. Her head rested against his shoulder, breath shallow. He carried her back to his camp, laid her on a padded mat, cleaned her cuts, wrapped her arms. She watched him the whole time. Not with fear, with confusion, as if she didn't understand why he was helping her. Mark placed a blanket over her and sat nearby. "You don't have to talk," he said, "but you're not alone anymore." Her lips moved slightly, then, barely audible, she whispered one word. "How long?" "How long what?" he asked. She looked at the ceiling of the tent. "Since I fell." Mark frowned. "I don't know, but your signal's been going for years, maybe longer." Her eyes filled with something like shock. "They never came." He nodded slowly. "Who were you waiting for?" She didn't answer, just turned her head away. He didn't press her. He sat quietly, letting the silence fill the space between them. But inside he was already asking questions. Who was she? Why was she abandoned? And who would leave someone like her behind? As the wind brushed through the trees carrying salt and mist from the sea, Mark knew one thing for certain. This island held more secrets than he'd expected, and the biggest one was now lying in his care. Stranger with golden eyes. The rain started at dawn, soft at first, then heavy, falling in thick sheets across the island. Mark sat inside his tent, boiling water over a small fire, listening to the steady tap of droplets. On canvas, outside the jungle hissed with wet life. Inside it was quiet except for her breathing. The alien woman lay curled under 2 thermal blankets. Her skin no longer looked dry and cracked, but the glow beneath her skin still flickered like a weak signal. Her hair had been cleaned, pulled gently away from her face. A cloth bandage ran along one arm where the worst of the scratches had bled. She was awake, but she hadn't said anything since yesterday, not a single word since how long. Mark watched her from across the tent, not speaking either. Sometimes silence was better than questions. He poured some warm water into a tin cup and placed it beside her. "You're not burning anymore," he said quietly. "That's a good sign." Her eyes opened slowly, still golden, still alert. She sat up just slightly, her hands shaky as she picked up the cup. "What? Are you?" she asked, voice hoarse. Mark raised an eyebrow. "You mean who?" She blinked. "Yes, who?" "Mark Halden," he said. "Exploration and Charting Division. Class 4 pilot. Human." She stared at him for a long moment. "You're real," he chuckled. "Last I checked." She closed her eyes, holding the cup close. "They said no one would come here, not ever." "They were wrong," Mark said. "They're never wrong." Something in her tone chilled him. He leaned forward. "Who are they?" She didn't answer. Instead, she looked out through the tent flap toward the jungle. "You shouldn't stay here. It's not safe." He frowned. "I've walked the whole island. There's no predators, no weapons, no threats." "Not anymore," she whispered. Later that day, Mark worked outside the tent, trying to rebuild the broken antenna from the old alien dome he had found. The device still pulsed barely, but it needed power. As he adjusted the crystal lattice beneath the rusted housing, he noticed her standing nearby, barefoot in the grass, robe brushing her ankles, quiet as the rain. "You should be resting," he said. "I've rested for years," she said softly. "You remember how long?" She shook her head. "Not clearly, but I remember the sky turning red, the crash, the fire." "Was that your ship?" "Yes. It was supposed to be my exile." Mark turned toward her slowly. "They sent you here, on purpose." "Yes." "Why?" Her lips tightened. "I broke something sacred to them." He waited. After a while, she said, "I protected someone I was told to forget. A child. Not for my kind." He understood now. "You showed mercy." "I broke a law." Mark looked at her, really looked. Not at her skin or her eyes or the symbols on her body, but at her posture, her voice, her presence. Not just abandoned, punished. She noticed his gaze and looked away. "I was supposed to fade quietly, but I kept the beacon alive, hoping someone different might hear it." Mark nodded. "You hoped for someone like me?" She didn't reply. Instead, she looked at him again, this time with something new in her eyes. Curiosity? Hope? Fear? "What is your kind known for?" she asked. "Depends who you ask," he said with a half smile. "Some say we fight too much, others say we feel too much." "Do you leave others behind?" Mark thought for a moment. "Sometimes. But the best of us don't." She stared at him, then said almost too quietly, "I don't remember my name." He blinked. "Do you want to remember?" She hesitated, then whispered, "No. I want to choose a new one." He smiled gently. "All right then. What name would you like?" She looked up at the clouds. "Lara," she said after a pause. "Lara," he repeated. "Nice to meet you." Her face softened, not quite a smile, but something close. That night, as the storm cleared and the stars returned, Lara sat beside Mark near the campfire. She didn't say much, but when he handed her a meal pack, she didn't hesitate. When he spoke, she listened, and when he looked her way, she didn't look away. She was no longer a stranger, not to him and not to herself. The island's buried truth. The jungle was thicker than Mark remembered. Giant roots twisted across the path. Thick vines hung like sleeping snakes, and the buzzing of alien insects filled the air. The heat pressed against his back as he moved, deeper inland, machete in one hand, scanner in the other. Lara followed behind him, her footsteps light, her golden eyes scanning the shadows. "This way," she said suddenly, pointing toward a ridge. Mark glanced at her. "You remember something?" She nodded slowly. "Not much, just noise, a crash. I think something is still buried here." They climbed the slope, slipping on loose rocks, until they reached a clearing surrounded by tall trees. In the center was a mound of overgrown brush. Metal shimmered. Beneath the leaves, Mark stepped forward and brushed the plants away. A broken hull plate, charred edges, alien symbols. "This was your ship," he said quietly. Lara stood beside him, arms crossed. She didn't speak. Mark circled the wreckage, checking for any intact systems. The crash had been violent. The hull was torn open. No sign of crew or bodies. Just emptiness. Then he spotted something, a chamber under the wreckage. Sealed. He crouched down and opened it. Inside were two black cubes, about the size of a hand. One was cracked. The other still glowed. He pulled it out carefully. Lara stepped forward. "That's a memory vault," she whispered. "Ours are not kept on computers. They're kept in those." "What's on it?" "Whatever. They wanted to forget." Back at the camp, Mark connected the vault to his ship's data core. The translation system struggled at first, but slowly, images began to appear. Holograms of a council chamber. Lara stood in the center, younger, wearing ceremonial robes. Around her sat members of her race, tall and expressionless. The voice was flat and cold. "Lara of the first line, you are charged with emotional breach, unauthorized empathy, and defense of a non-aligned species. Do you accept this judgment?" "I do not," Lara's recorded voice answered. "But I accept exile." The hologram faded. Mark turned to her. "They punished you for saving someone?" Lara sat on the ground, knees drawn up, her voice low. "He was a child, human, injured. They told me to leave him. He was not ours, but I couldn't. So they exiled you to die alone." She nodded. "They believed isolation would erase the emotion, that I would fade." Mark clenched his fists. "That's not justice, that's cruelty. To them, it was order." He stood, paced. The sky outside was darkening again. "They sent you here, and no one else ever came?" Lara's voice was almost a whisper. "I think they made sure no one could. But your signal, I modified it before they launched me," she said. "Just enough to make it weak but findable." Mark blinked. "You wanted someone like me to hear it." "I hoped," she said. "I didn't believe. Not until you came." He sat beside her. For a long time they said nothing. Then she asked, "Will they come now?" He looked at the glowing vault. "Maybe. But if they do, they'll find someone who's not alone anymore." Her eyes met his. "You'd stand against them?" "Yes." Lara touched the edge of the vault. "Then maybe it's time I stopped hiding." Later that night, they buried the cracked cube beneath the roots of a tree. "What was on that one?" Mark asked. Lara looked down. "The part of me they tried to destroy." She pressed her hand to the soil. "But now, something else can grow." Mark watched her under the starlight, stronger now, not just a survivor, a woman reclaiming her past, And in that moment, he realized she wasn't just found. She was rising. Echoes of the hunted. It began with a hum, soft at first, almost like wind brushing through the trees, but deeper, mechanical. Mark froze. He was in the northern grove collecting soil samples. Lara was by the cliffs checking the small solar station they'd built together. He tapped the side of his helmet, switching to scan mode. The signal was faint, but not local. Airborne unit detected. Unregistered drone. Approaching fast. He dropped the tools and ran. Lara looked up from the solar panel as the sound reached her. Ears, sharp, too familiar. She turned to the sky. A black drone was descending slowly, scanning beams sweeping across the treetops. Silent. Steady. Not a machine built for peace. They found me, she whispered. She turned and ran, vanishing, into the brush just as Mark burst through the trees. I saw it, he said, breathless. It's not alone, Lara replied. If it's here, others will follow. Then we have to go. Lara stopped running. Go where? Mark hesitated. There was nowhere else. Not yet. They returned to the camp and pulled together their supplies. Lara packed the memory vault in a metal case, her hands steady but her breathing shallow. This time they won't exile me, she said. They'll erase me. Mark checked his rifle. They'll have to get through me first. She looked at him. Really looked. You shouldn't stay. This isn't your fight. It is now, he said. They abandoned you. I didn't. She turned away quickly, but not before he saw the tears in her golden eyes. That night, the jungle was too quiet. The wind had stopped. The birds were gone. The air itself felt tense. They took turns watching the trees. Mark held the rifle tight in his lap. Lara sat beside him, back straight, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. I remember. They're machines, she said softly. They don't just take you, they rewrite you, erase your memories, your voice, your will. He looked at her. They couldn't erase your mercy. But they tried, she said. A long silence. Then she asked, Why do you stay? He thought for a moment, then said, Because you stayed alive. When everything told you not to. Because you chose to help someone when it cost you everything, and because I see you. Her voice cracked. Even when I don't? Especially then. She leaned against him. Just for a moment. And the quiet didn't feel so heavy anymore. The next day the drone returned, this time closer. It hovered over the beach, scanning their camp. Mark aimed at it. I can take the shot. No, Lara said. Not yet. She stepped forward, lifted her hand and made a slow circular motion with her fingers. A shimmer of light moved across her skin, soft pulses, like waves. The drone stopped scanning. For a second, it simply hovered, then turned and flew away. Mark blinked. What did you do? Lara dropped to her knees, gasping. I spoke to it. A command code. From before. You controlled it? No, I confused it. Made it question the order. He helped her up. How long until they send something? Smarter, soon. He looked out at the sea. Then we prepare. They spent the next 2 days turning the camp into a trap. Motion sensors along the perimeter. Shield panels powered by the last of their battery packs. Mark converted a broken communication dish into a jamming tower. Lara rewired one of the old, alien relay cores to create false signals. Echoes of her presence scattered across the island. If they're hunting you, he said, let's make sure they get lost in the noise. She smiled for the first time in days. Your kind is more dangerous than they believed. He grinned. You haven't seen humans when they're stubborn. On the third night, Lara stood at the edge of the cliff, hair blowing in the wind. Behind her, Mark checked the last of the sensors. You still scared? He asked. Yes, she said. Good. Means you're alive. She turned to him. You're not afraid? I'm afraid of a lot of things, he said, but not of standing beside someone who deserves to be free. She stepped closer. No one's ever said that to me. He looked her in the eyes. Then let me be the first. The choice to stay. The ship arrived just before sunrise. Low and silent, it broke through the clouds like a shadow with wings. Sleek, black, and clearly not from Lara's people. It bore the symbol of the United Human Systems, Mark's own. Distress beacon had reached them after all. Mark stood at the clearing, rifle lowered, eyes narrowed. Lara stood just behind him, hidden in the trees, hood drawn low over her face. The landing ramp dropped with a hiss. A woman stepped out, her uniform crisp, her face unreadable. "Explorer Mark Halden?" she called. He nodded. "That's me. Your beacon was received. Your presence here is unauthorized, but your signal was flagged for emergency." She glanced around the jungle. "You're alone?" Mark hesitated, then said, "Not exactly." Lara stepped out, slow, careful. The officer's hand twitched near her holster. "Easy," Mark said. "She's not a threat." Lara kept her eyes down, silent, still glowing faintly. "You brought an alien female into human territory without clearance," the officer said. "You know that's a violation." "She didn't come with me," Mark replied. "I found her, dying, alone, left behind by her own kind." "That's not our jurisdiction." Mark stepped forward. "Then make it your responsibility." Inside the ship they ran medical scans. Lara sat quietly while machines beeped and blinked around her. No resistance, no fear, just silence. Mark waited outside, arms crossed. The officer returned after an hour. "She's healthy," she said, "but her DNA signature matches known exile records from an alien tribunal system. They marked her as a rogue because she saved a child," Mark growled. "Regardless," the officer said, "we're ordered to extract you, not her." Mark stared at her. "So you're going to leave her here again?" "We have no authority to take her in, and no protection to give." Mark's voice dropped. "Then I'm not going." The officer blinked. "Excuse me? If she stays, I stay. That's desertion." "No," he said. "That's choice." The officer looked at him like he had gone. "Man, you'd give up your record, your rank, your future for her?" "She was left behind by everyone," he said, "and still chose kindness, still trusted someone like me." He looked through the glass at Lara, who sat with her hands folded. "I'm not leaving her behind. Not again." They gave him 1 hour, 1 hour to reconsider. He didn't. He spent it beside her, hands resting near hers. "You heard what they said?" he asked. "Yes." "Do you want to go with them?" She shook her head. "No." "Why?" Her voice was quiet. "Because with them, I'm a record, a risk, a file to close." She turned to him. "With you, I'm seen." He reached into his pocket and took out something small. A necklace. Simple, round silver pendant. Scratched from age. "My mother gave this to me," he said. "Said it was to remind me never to walk away from someone who needed help." He placed it in her hand. "You've helped me more than you know." She looked at him for a long time, then whispered, "I choose to stay." Then we stay together. The officer didn't understand it, but she didn't stop it. The ship left with only one passenger. Mark watched it disappear into the clouds, then looked at Lara. "You sure?" She nodded. "I don't want the world to see me anymore," she said. "I want to build one instead." He smiled. "Then let's get to work." She reached out, hesitated, then took his hand. Not because she needed rescue, but because she'd finally found someone worth walking forward with. Fire in the canopy. They came at dusk. 6 dark crafts, no lights, no sound, just shadows moving beneath the clouds. They didn't announce themselves. They didn't ask questions. They came as executioners. Lara felt it first. A sharp pain in her chest, just under the skin where the old signal once lived. Her breath caught, and she stumbled near the garden they'd been building. Mark was at her side instantly. "They're here," she whispered. "Not the humans. Them." He didn't ask how she knew. He just said, Then we're ready. Mark had spent the past week turning their camp into a trap. Old alien power cores were buried beneath the clearing, rewired with pulse triggers. Crude barriers made from wreckage and stone lined the perimeter. Motion sensors, repurposed from the shipwreck, tracked anything that moved beyond the tree line. They couldn't win a war, but they could make it cost something. Lara stood near the center of the camp, her robe fluttering in the wind, her body glowing faintly. "You don't have to fight," Mark said. "You could still run." "I'm not running anymore," she replied. "Not from them, not from what I am." The first drone entered the clearing just after sunset. It hovered in silence, scanning. Mark hit the first trigger. A burst of fire erupted from the ground. The drone spun, caught in the blast, then crashed into the dirt. Two more came from the trees. Lara raised both hands. Light shimmered between her fingers, energy bending into shape, flowing from her skin like liquid sun. She pushed forward. The wave of light hit the drones like a hammer. One dropped instantly. The other spun wildly, then exploded mid-air. Her knees buckled. Mark caught her before she hit the ground. "That was new," he said. She coughed, breath short. "I didn't know I could, until now." He nodded. "Just don't burn yourself out," she smiled weakly. "No promises." The second wave came faster. Two ships descended from above, opening fire near the edge of the forest. Beams of purple light scorched the soil, tearing through their barriers. Mark fired back with the last of the pulse charges. The blast rocked one of the ships, sending it spiraling into the trees. The other hovered just above them. A voice echoed from its speakers, sharp in her native tongue. "Lara of Exile, surrender now. Mercy is not offered again." Lara stood, trembling, but tall. She walked into the open, lifting her chin. "I am not yours," she shouted. "I never was." The ship charged its weapons. Mark moved to shield her, but she raised her hand first. A beam of pure light burst from her palm. It wasn't a weapon. It was memory, force, identity, a signal from her core. The ship froze in place. Its lights blinked. Its systems glitched, and then it left, quietly, retreating back into the sky. Silence returned to the island. The fires died. The drones burned, and in the middle of the smoke and ash stood Mark and Lara, alive. Together. She sank to her knees, exhausted. He knelt beside her, wrapping his arms around her. "You did it," he whispered. "You chose." She nodded weakly. "And now, so will others." That night, they didn't sleep. They watched the stars instead, not in fear of what might come next, but in wonder of what they might become. The island becomes home. Morning came with silence, not the kind that follows fear, but the kind that lives in peace. For the first time in what felt like forever, the island was truly still. Mark stood at the cliff's edge, watching the waves crash gently below. Beside him, Lara knelt in the dirt, planting the final seed in their new garden. Her sleeves were rolled up, her silver-blue skin streaked with soil and sunlight. A soft wind moved through her hair, and for once, the glow beneath her skin wasn't from fear or survival, it was simply light. "They won't be back," she said quietly. Mark nodded. "They know now." They saw something they didn't expect. Lara looked at him. "I didn't expect you." He smiled. "I didn't expect you either." In the weeks that followed, the attack, the island changed. Mark rebuilt the landing pad using salvaged parts from both his ship and the wreckage from Lara's. He didn't send another distress call. They didn't want visitors. Not yet. Lara began to leave the edge of the trees, walking freely now through the open spaces she once feared. She no longer looked over her shoulder, no longer waited for the sound of ships or chains. She taught Mark the language of her people, not the spoken one, but the symbols, the meaning behind every line, every mark on her skin, and together, They began to write a new one. On a stone tablet near the heart of the island, they carved, "Here, no one is abandoned." One evening, as the stars returned above them, Lara sat by the fire holding the silver pendant Mark had once given her. She turned to him. "Why did you choose to stay?" Mark didn't answer right away. He tossed another stick into the fire and said softly, "Because you were the first thing in a long time that made me feel like staying was worth it." Lara blinked. "And why did you choose me?" he asked. She smiled. "Because you saw me before I remembered how to see myself." They built a home, simple, made of wood and stone and old tech. No towers, no walls, no barriers, just openness, space to grow. And when one day a young alien girl crash-landed on the far edge of the island, afraid and injured, it was Lara who found her, who wrapped her in a blanket, gave her water, and whispered, "You're not alone." Mark watched from the garden as the girl cried into Lara's arms. He didn't need to ask, he already knew. This island had become more than shelter. It had become a beginning. In the end, no history book recorded the place. No council wrote down the names of those who stood against exile. But if you listened closely on certain nights, beneath the stars and beside the sea, you could hear soft laughter, the hum of a voice long thought lost, and the heartbeat of two lives that were never meant to find each other, but did. Not out of duty, not out of chance, but out of choice.